Illinois Central, Monday morning rail. 15 cars and 15 restless passengers, 3 conductors and 25 sacks of mail.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. The Digital Roundtable is back. The gang is back. I see some people starting to log in. Happy to be here today. Had a great 4th of July weekend. I did not get sick. I stayed locked down in my house. So, Llewelyn, how was your 4th of July weekend?
It was quite splendid, thank you. Very fine. No fireworks of any kind, either those that go bang or any other illuminations. Pleasant, quiet time. I sat outside with some friends, and it was excellent.
Excellent. John, how was your 4th of July?
I had a great golf game early in the morning. Went out and played a good golf game, and then sit down with a winner of the Masters, 2-time Master winner, Mr. Ben Crenshaw, and talked about a lot of great things about golf in Austin. Came back and had some good barbecue from a great barbecue joint called the County Line in Austin. I was rolling, baby.
Yeah.
So
what is the barbecue joint? What is the barbecue joint?
The County Line.
County Line?
Yes.
I shall look for it next time I'm there.
Yeah.
Very good barbecue in Austin.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a lot of good places in Austin. So, gentlemen, things are progressing. You know, on the COVID front, the case tolls are climbing, almost 3 million, or maybe 3 million by now. 351 cases up from last week, which is a lot. It seems like, you know, things are, you know, continue to increase there. The death toll is another 4,394 folks that unfortunately passed the last 7 days, and so we're up to 130,000 or so, and that's not looking good. But you know, hopefully things will come down here. People get responsible. The soft openings continue, and obviously, you know, there's flare up in California and Texas and all the southern states primarily. For obvious reasons, I think, you know, people are probably taking advantage too much of the weather and gathering together. Stock market is up a little bit. It was up significantly 2 days ago, then went down a little bit. Is up a little bit today. The price of crude oil is up $1.80. Is now at $40.20 as of this morning. Price of gas in Austin went down, believe it or not, in 1 week, 14 cents. So it went up 19 cents and went down 14 cents. I figure a lot of people are more driving than flying on airplanes. So I would think that price of gas should be going up dramatically, but apparently not. We added 4.8 million jobs in June, gentlemen. That's an interesting stat. And according to the government, unemployment is down to 11.1% from 14.7% in April. Interesting note that I thought it was an interesting point, and I'll want to hear your comments on some of these elements, is according to Yelp, which is a restaurant reservation sort of, you know, rating website, 53% of the restaurants that they have been tracking have shut down. 53% of the restaurants that they have been tracking have shut down in the last 90 days. That's a significant loss. Lots of jobs there. So what do you all make out? How are we doing? Llewelyn, how are things?
Well, I just touch on the points you've made. I think the stock market is really not an indicator of anything at this point in time. It's detached in a world of its own. It will eventually reattach, and it will probably come down quite substantially when it reattaches. We've seen this sort of thing before. We've seen countries that are in default where the stock market is doing well. So don't be entirely sure that the temperature of a nation's economy can be taken by its stock market. It's an indicator, but it's one of several. Do not, by the same token, get too carried away with the increase in jobs. They were recorded in the early part of June. Subsequently, we had the second wave, or as I call it, the stupid wave, because people started behaving badly, taking their masks off, going to the beach, and engaging in reckless conduct at a time of emergency. And that has given us the spike. We're going to see a little better in terms of people in hospitals and leaving hospitals, because hospitals are getting better at what they do. Also because other ways of treating secondary infections, the terrible inflammation which accompanies this disease, the hospitals have learned how to deal with it. There are off-label drugs that are working. There's the steroid, which you heard about. I've just heard about, and I'm working now to get some publicity for it, about low-level radiation, which all hospitals are capable of supplying, is a massive reducer. Maybe 20 minutes of radiation will save you going on a ventilator. More about that when I know more about it, but it comes from a very reputable scientist, a great expert on nuclear and its uses in medicine as well as its uses elsewhere. So what is very promising is the use of other therapies developed for something else, coming into play in the hospital to help this disease, and it's showing the death rates is working. It's showing the shortening of the hospital duration, the residency in the hospital of patients. It, though, is not helping the rate of infection, which is climbing very dramatically as a result of conduct which has taken place pretty well throughout June, with beaches crowded, restaurants crowded, people going to bars where they've been open. I think a time of more sanity and circumspection has arrived. I've just come back from the restaurant where waiters were wearing masks, tables were far apart, and it was outdoors. Is that totally safe? Probably not, but it's certainly a lot safer than people crowded around the bar without masks, drinking and singing and spluttering over each other. People are more careful now. I still see a lack of urgency among young people. Young people may not die at the same rate, although they're catching up, but they certainly can infect old people with just as much facility as anybody else can infect anyone else. We're all in this together. There are no exempt parts of the community, and we've got to realize that. I think, if I might say so, that Texas, which had a certain swagger, Texas having swagger, a certain swagger about their ability to handle this has been quieted. Likewise, Florida, you don't think Florida is having swagger. There you are. That has been another case where over-enthusiasm and some sort of expectation that they were exempt from the normal rules. Nobody is exempt. Behave badly, you'll get the disease, and we will not beat it as a nation until we behave better. Well, the great hope, therapies in the hospital, I've said this before, and I'm just now more convinced, are going to get very, very good. So by the time you get to the hospital, they're going to know what to do to you, and they're going to do it quickly, and you're not going to have to go into the ICU and have all of the horrid things done to you in the ventilators. But it is less certain that we will get a vaccine. I've been on the phone with various experts, one of them working on a vaccine in her own company. It is not certain that we will get a vaccine, and it is not certain that a vaccine will immediately be available in America, because it was developed overseas. We've been so rude to other countries, they're not going to bend over backwards to give it to us first. The Brits have already said if the Oxford vaccine, which is the most promising, comes through, they want it first, which is not unreasonable. After that, there'll be a great scramble. as often happens with innovation, there may be several vaccines come to market about the same time. With polio, we had 2, this time we may have 20. There's going to have to be a winnowing, and at some point, the central government, the federal government, is going to have to take some responsibility and execute that responsibility. The decision will have to be made, which vaccine, what resources are going to go into it, and how, if it works, we're going to get it to the maximum number of people in the shortest time. We're looking at the fall and the winter, likely to be a much worse time for us to infect each other. We can't go to outdoor restaurants, for example, at least not up in this part of the country. Nowhere north of the Mason-Dixon line and quite a few south of it.
John.
Well, let's make some sense out of the numbers. Let's, if we look at the deaths are down, revised down to 130,000. And of course, you should expect the numbers to go up as the testing, that is, those people have been infected. One of the numbers we can look at is what's the ratio? If we got 130 deaths, and let's say that we get up to testing, 6 million people, wouldn't it be wonderful if the number continued to go down as the hospitals really begin to not fill up? So I think we need to look at a number of things when we look at this COVID now. The number of deaths have been revised down. The more we test, the more we find. We should test so that we can look at the ratio between the number of deaths and the people that we test. And as an independent variable, as we should say, put in there the hospitals, who's in the hospitals, the number of beds that's related to the hospitals. So as Llewelyn pointed out in his interesting way, Texas could not handle the spike. This would be the only thing in our history, of course, Llewelyn, that we could not handle. But to be sure, we know that we have a problem. But I think that the testing is good, and I'll watch the ratio of the number of deaths and who's in the hospital and the number of beds. The other thing that I find interesting is the 4.8 million jobs that were created. I wonder, if I can wonder out aloud, when you said that 50% plus of the restaurants closed, I wonder if those people went to other kinds of enterprises. Perhaps the restaurants went to delivery.
Yep.
Rather than have the restaurant, they completely shut it down and revitalize themselves as they deliver. But at any rate, as we look at the night in the news, when the person comes on and say, we had 4.8 million jobs added in June, I wonder how many will be added in July.
Right.
I wonder how many
will see a diminution.
And also, or if we do have a spike. Now, what this has also told us on the data science is that when we first started, we were not sure that the jobs would come back so fast. Mm-hmm. But what it told us is that once, before we started the spike, jobs did come back. So we extrapolate to the future. The question is, will that trend continue? Because, we had some interesting observations about the future of jobs. What's obvious is that we added 8 million, perhaps we add another 8 million and continue to do so, even with another spike. So the question is, if we stop spiking by November, December, I'm looking at January, by the way, I wonder out loud, will the unemployment rate return to where it was, at least deviations around where it was before we had all of this going on. Yeah. The other thing is I find interesting is the price of gasoline. And you made an interesting passing statement about people driving to their destination rather than flying. So we're gonna use this number to talk about the airline industry. You did not have it there, but if you look at the airline industry, the hotel industry, perhaps it's feeding the automobile industry. At a time, of course, when we're not interested in feeding the automobile industry. So you're talking about people talking about driving to Idaho to play golf, driving to Houston, driving to Dallas, and never being on an airplane again. So to look at, if we take that number of automobile or the price of gas and extrapolate, that is, you sort of to the airline industry, boy, they are really hurting, which means that the hotel industry is really hurting. So I think the things that's employment, the unemployment rate it bounced back. It might go away, but it did bounce back. The price of gas will be reflective in the future. And I also think that the COVID numbers are very, very interesting. But you know, we have the flu usually take out about 70 people. It takes them a whole year to do so. So if you say we have 130 deaths in America, and if the flu takes out, let's just say 60 or 70,000 a year, you add 7, that's 140,000. That's pretty wild. So I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there is no doubt that the percentage of death as it relates to the total number of cases is going down dramatically because the number of cases is going up dramatically. Right. So the percentage of death is really tanking at a huge pace.
Right.
So again, you know, the question is, do you guys think that in terms of opening up fully, do we need to test half of the population? What's the sense of that? I mean, you know, I personally, with the social distancing and the mask, feel comfortable going back outside. A lot of people probably don't, but you know, how many more tests before, you know, everything kind of, you know, comes back? And by the way, I don't think that we will ever see a vaccine on this. That's my own personal opinion, and I have no science behind that. But I don't think that there's a way to get a vaccine for this disease because it mutates on its own, and we're on whatever new strand.
It's like all viruses within a certain band.
Right.
So it is possible we'll get a vaccine. It is not certain. I certainly have talked to people working on vaccines, and they're pretty optimistic when they are only at this point just gone into primate.
But should we as a society be counting on a vaccine to come back to work, or should we be assuming that it's not coming back to work and creating new rules?
We should look at the whole panoply of scientific options. First of all, testing is very important, and any antipathy to it is hard to understand, because by testing you find the carriers, isolate the carriers, and reduce the infection. Mm-hmm. If three of us were making this program, sitting around a table and being very animated, some of us are quite animated, we tend to discharge droplets from our mouths. Mm-hmm. It would be a damn good idea if the three of us were tested first, that we don't infect each other.
Right.
So that's where testing comes in. It's got nothing to do with the number of people who end up in the emergency room. What is happening, and you're so right, and which I mentioned, is the emergency room now knows what to do when you get there. They're doing it better, they're doing it more efficiently, and there are therapies, and more therapies are coming. Extirpation, they call it, where something developed for one reason works somewhere else.
And so, I think I agree with that.
That's terribly, terribly important. I have not read it yet, but I just got an email. I asked one of the scientific officers at NASA, who I know and use for information, to explain how the whole theory of this, and AI comes into it. If you've got 1,000 compounds, you really need AI to sort them out and say which one might work in this circumstance. Mm-hmm. Long term, we are going to change the way we live. On employment, you can see where the rubber hits the road. They're down in the automobile factories. Employment is down. It's chugging over. I've just been talking to somebody who's come back from looking at the Ford factories. He's a steel expert, and he does analysis of the requirements of steel in factories. It's way down. You've got the people at the bottom where the rubber hits the road. In catering, which is often semi-skilled, in hotels, which is semi-skilled, these people are going to find it very hard. Every day I see a new outfit has gone bankrupt. If a retailer goes bankrupt, it's not just the people behind the counter, not just the people in the accounting offices. The whole supply chain to that retailer. I think we're going to settle in for a long period, maybe, and I'm inclined to think the economy will not recover much before 2000. 20,000. 2028, which is also a number that came inadvertently out of the Office of Management and Budget, so the government knows this. I think we have a lot of happy political talk because it's an election year. We're going to bump along. It's not going to be a smooth passage at any point. We may, at some point, also get an increase in inflation. It's not in sight now, but as the government continues with vast expenditures to hold the economy together, at some point you trigger inflation. Nobody knows where that danger inflection point is, but it is something that should be borne in mind. I think we're going to live with about 8 to 10% essentially structural unemployment for the best part of 5 to 7 years.
John?
Yes, on the testing point, this is a thing where, as Llewelyn said, we don't know we have it. So, if we're sitting around a table and I just feel bad, I have a fever and I have the flu. But in this case, I could have the flu and don't even know it. So I expect the testing will continue. I think the whole idea, as Llewelyn said, is we must know who we interact with. So it would be different if you got the flu and you went home, but now you can have the flu with this thing and just stay at work because you feel absolutely wonderful. The other thing I want to talk to my English counterpart about is the stock market. This is where my people invest, so to speak. And we must realize that the economy is affected by the stock market because the people who take their earnings from the stock market also give heavily to 501cs. They give to the Boys and Girls Club. They give to the alma mater. They give to the University of Texas. They give to their children. So in a real sense, we need a measurement of the giving based on the stock market. Now, so the stock market is not related to the economy. It sort of has a big impact on the economy as the giving takes place across all kinds of sectors. Okay, and finally, I want to talk some about, Andreas, I think we need to talk some more about this airline industry and what that absolutely means for travelers, and what that means for work, what that means for meetings, what that means for for Boeing. It's pretty interesting to me that as we look at what's going on here, in other words, you take people away from travel, right? It can have a tremendous effect. On the other hand, the service stations around the internet, they might boom up because everybody's stopping, paying, $5 for Coke, and $4 for some potato chips, and et cetera. So when I look at all the stuff that we're talking about today, if I just might ask you guys ideas about the impact of the fact that Southwest Airlines, for example, my private airplane, and somebody wrote Southwest Airlines on the side of it for some reason. What's the impact for the whole economy?
This is a very good point you raise, and it's very critical because it's not, as you said, it's not just the airlines and Boeing. It's all the other parts of the airline infrastructure, all the collateral damage that will come from an airline collapse. And we are looking at a collapse of airlines. The 4 predominant ones will probably not be around in 5 years, so probably 1 or 2. And that may be with a considerable amount of help from the government. And it's not just the big airframe manufacturer, Boeing, the only one we have, but by extension, our colleagues across the pond at
Airbus.
It's not just that, it's the smaller ones, the regional carriers, the smaller jets. An interesting point, though, is that there is a great shortage of available, I'm told, I'm not in that category myself, of private jets. It is very hard to get any time with a private jet. If you want to fly to Los Angeles and you go down to the airport and you think of the friendly Winterjet company, they're all leased out. They're all busy. There's a boom in personalized aircraft rentals. And that is a function, I think, that These are the people who otherwise you might see in first class. They don't want to be there. They want to be in what they feel to be a secure environment. And also an awful lot of flights have been cancelled. The airline industry may be the last to come back. The ancillary benefits of this will be that bus companies may do better. I think Amtrak on some routes will do better. And I think that gas stations will do better until such time as we have more electric vehicles when they'll begin to hurt. And then really imaginative people will decide what to do with the gas station, which is a fairly uncompromising structure. And you don't turn it into a hairdressing salon easily, but you can.
So John, I maybe you know this or not, but I've always thought in my mind that the most profitable part of the airline business was the cargo that goes on, on the belly of the plane every day, and not necessarily the passengers. And I don't see how the demand for the cargo moving around to every location would stop versus couldn't the airline industry just resize their airplanes to take more cargo and less people and still be profitable?
I agree, but they'll be profitable, but the hotel up here by me, the Renaissance Hotel, would be empty.
So what if the Renaissance Hotel remodeled two of the 7 floors into office space?
Well, I think that's what they would have to do. I think what you're mentioning is you have 2 things going on. Number one, how will the airline industry survive? What you're saying is really, they're really a carrier like Federal Express with people in it. That's the one thing.
Right.
It is the people, it is the movement of people or the non-movement of people that creates the collateral damage. Mm-hmm. Whether it's conventions in Austin, Texas, which has an impact on the restaurants in Austin, conventions in New York City.
Right.
So it's not so much, it is the interconnectedness of the business models that produces the collateral damage throughout, whether it's Uber, whether it's cab companies, whether it's food service companies. So exactly right. We could just have another carrier with the airlines themselves. And I don't know the numbers on that, but I can certainly find out because the present CEO of Southwest Airlines, Jared, I think, was in my class, believe it or not, at one time. Yeah. So I do believe that it can be, it's very, very interesting. But remember, I'm speaking of the movement of people and the collateral damage that it would have.
And airlines do. I used to be quite friendly with the president of one, it's a European one, even said the same. Bums on seats, he said. That's why we jam so many in the back. That's how we make money. And anything that detracts from that, there have been attempts to run airlines that were in first class airline. People want transportation, now people don't. Most of the cargo, as I understand it, is ancillary income to a passenger airline, not fundamental income. Fundamental income is the people, ancillary income is transporting goods, and there are a lot of aircraft flying that only transport goods. All the flowers we get from South America, most of the fruit and vegetables come by air, and there's an enormous amount moved every day and every night by air. But there are also a lot of people who used to be moved by air and not, and the collateral damage from that is huge because these are the people over the rest.
Maybe the answer is flying casinos.
That's been tried too.
That's been tried out of New Orleans and they got them in trouble. So be careful with that one. I mean, out of New York City.
All right. Let me take a pause here, and I'm going to share my screen real quick to do our quick break. So, Digital 360 Summit, virtual via Zoom, August 18th, 19th, 20th, 25th, 26th, 27th. Come and see us. And it's over 60 speakers. I think we're up to 68 now. 16 keynotes, 11 panels, followed by 11 white papers and 28 videos. We have all the major industries, including space, smart factories, buildings, utilities, water, energy, you name it. We're thankful that all these companies are going to be speaking. Pretty exciting lineup, including all of us on this call. And thank you to Texas State for sponsoring the Digital-Roundtable. Much appreciated. Love Texas State. So anyway, gentlemen, real quick, you know, we talked last week briefly about some of the telecom activity that is going on. And one of the things that I shared was that Dish Network and SpaceX are planning to build a low orbit satellite network for 5G across the globe. And I can tell you that from last week to this week, Finland just issued the first LTE 5G private licenses in their country. AT&T and Accenture are building a 5G network for Phillips 66 and all their refineries. These are private networks. A company called Sigfox, which makes a low latency network for machine-to-machine Internet of Things. It's opening a whole subsidiary in Puerto Rico with the concept of the next smart country. They're basically wanting to take LTE and basically, you know, modernize Puerto Rico, which is coming back from all the disasters they had. And then the last thing that happened this week that got announced on 5G is China Mobile, which is the largest operator in China. There are two government-owned, obviously. They are building the largest NB-IoT, machine-to-machine Internet of Things network in the world. They believe that they will have more than 10 billion devices up and running by December. So what's your take on the fact that, again, COVID seems to accelerate the digitalization and trends? Seems like the 5G people, the telecommunications folks are running hard. What does that mean for the comeback? What does that mean for a year from now if we have broadband everywhere?
You know, as Michael Porter, my good friend from the Harvard Business School, when you're doing it would say when you're doing analysis of industry, everybody want to go where the action is. Mm-hmm. So if you can think about, and of course this is a software, but if you can think about the number of computer companies that was in Austin, Texas, it wasn't just Michael Dell doing computers. Everybody was trying to start a computer company. So therefore, I think that the telecom, the 5G, is following this trend, but they're making an interesting bet. They're making a bet that the business models of what they call the cloud and how fast the cloud is, and et cetera, will be able to accommodate and enhance all of the enterprises of the future. Can you imagine that China Mobile, right, going so big in this, or can you imagine that AT&T and Accenture with their private 5G network and their Phillips 66 refinery, can you imagine the amount of investment that they're putting into this? It just means one thing. Just as sure as we invested in rail for the railroads, just as sure as we created the interstate highway for the movement of people and of course for wartime, then the new internet, the new place to be is telecom and 5G. Can't you imagine being in a board meeting at China Mobile saying, if we don't invest these billions, we will get left behind. So what I see a trend that happened in the automobile industry. There are lots of automobile companies making cars. It certainly happened in the computer industry. It certainly happened in other kinds of industries. I mean, even the smart cell phone industry. Mm-hmm. The question is, who will be the winners and who will be the losers?
Right. Llewelyn?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I agree with most of that, and I think you're quite right, but I don't think you're going to see an enormous number of new entries into telecom because the upfront cost is huge, whereas you could at one point start a car company fairly cheaply back in the turn of the 19th century, and and there were hundreds of car companies, and of course they fell by the way. There were lots of computer companies that had fallen by the way, because the threshold of entry was fairly low. With 5G, the threshold of entry is quite high at the beginning. It's a high threshold entry. It means the ability to lose billions of dollars if you get the net wrong. And as a result, you're not going to see, as much as I love the idea of people starting a telephone company in the garage, unless there's some new technology that helps everything. We all think of more of the same because we can't think outside.
No, Llewelyn, but this is what's happening. AT&T and Verizon are not going to build all these networks. These networks are being built by new players like Sigfox, or there are many other players. They're emerging. The actual cost of 5G, the actual cost of a 5G solution is an order of magnitude cheaper than a 4G solution.
Well, it depends on how thorough the internet, the build out has to be. And the way 5G technology is today, it requires tremendous build out, which means it's going to be confined for quite a few years, probably decades.
Yeah, but again, I think this is where the disconnect is. You're talking about a commercial network for you and I to roam talking across the country. Yeah. What's happening is private networks to deliver 5G on all the devices that I talk to automate my business. That's where the investment is being made. Tens of thousands of networks being created to use AI and machine learning to automate everything that we do. And the price of networks don't talk to each other.
And the price to do that is falling dramatically. I mean, the price to start a company is falling dramatically.
Right.
So if you look at the price that we had to pay 30 years ago for a coder, I mean, that's gone now. I mean, you can go pick the code up off of, maybe Google Scientific. Yeah, so my point was, I think there would be new people coming in, and it's not the same as AT&T. 5G, remember, it's a software deal. I mean, once you write the software, you don't have to reproduce it. You just continue to improve it.
But you have to have a physical build out. And the physical build out is going to be the stumbling block. And whole swaths of the country, as I understand it, will be on LTE for a long time.
Sure, absolutely.
I was thinking, I was in Boston, and there used to be a hotel, and it is all service now. Right down in the middle of Boston. So we could take a hotel like that's stumbling now, like the Renaissance by my house, and all of a sudden, bam, they're full of service. But I think you're right. I think
there are a lot of private networks being offered with LTE, and there is a boomlet in private networks for complex reasons, some security, some just efficiency, but they can be. You've got to ask the question is, who wants a product?
Yeah. So let's
the answer. Are the customers there? Who wants it? I remember when we were in a state of hysteria over massive computing, and it came about and nothing dramatic happened. Nobody ran away at the time when we thought the Japanese would run away with the market. It didn't happen.
Sure.
Computers sort of slipped into the world, parallel computing came in, it didn't happen. I suspect that 5G will come about without any dramatic public awareness of it. Some fortunes will be made, a lot of money will be lost, there'll be over expectation, as there always is for new technologies, and then there will be a settling down. There's something very interesting. We were talking about airline industry. And what is the saturation point? Nobody really wanted the Concorde. I loved it technologically, and I flew on it a few times, and I loved that too. The technology was stunning. It was totally extraordinary. The Delta wing, nobody had used a Delta wing and made it work, let alone for a commercial airline. And I was heartbroken when the United States Senate refused to finance a commercial supersonic transport in this country. in hindsight, I think the Senate was right. There was no great demand except from a narrow band of very wealthy business people for supersonic transports. And we have them. We have commercial planes flying right up to Mach 2, Mach 1, but that's it. Military is something different. But the Concorde was Mach 2.3. Amazing in that could also perform at lower altitudes. But there was no demand. And if you don't have demand for technology, in the end, it will be shelved.
Sure.
No, all I'm asking you, is there really demand for 5G?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let me just say this. I think it's a general improvement on 4G. That is, the average customer will not see what's going on, all right? But what happened is it becomes so much more efficient. It just means that perhaps things can happen faster. It means that your videos can be played faster. So it is not a destructive kind of technology that's replacing something like the airplane you're talking about. I mean, we've gone from what, 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G. And as we get up to 5G, it makes the opportunities more. It's like having a wider highway.
Well, I'm doing some reporting on this tomorrow, so next week I might be better informed. I'm interested in broadband, but we don't have broadband, which is pretty simple, straightforward LTE 4G. Right. And we've got to share these things around, and you've got to have fairly universal demand. Any business needs customers. You can't have the best mousetrap.
But again, I want you to think differently about this. Is that the business and the money of the future in 5G is about collecting the data from devices. It's not about you and me tweeting to each other.
Right.
And that's what's happening. Private networks are being built. AT&T is building a private network for Phillips 66 to use in their own refineries.
So it goes back to my concept of social physics. The question is, can we take all of this data and write the equations so that we can have a better world?
Right.
And that's what 5G is about.
So that's really what's happening, and I think it's fascinating. So another point related to smart buildings that had to do with 5G and 4G is South Korea Telecom, SK Telecom, the largest carrier in Korea, the only carrier in Korea, just to introduce a plan for smart factories in South Korea to basically deliver private networks to for the automation of all their devices at a very affordable new prices. Again, no longer just building a commercial network that you happen to maybe attach a device to, that my main customer is a consumer, but actually dedicated networks for Internet of Things. So one element that I think it's interesting to talk about, Uber acquired a company called Postmates, which was a competitor on their Uber Eats. They just bought it for $2.65 billion. And so I think that, the gig economy seems to be, reinventing itself and is still happening. And then there is a bill that passed the House for $1.5 trillion on infrastructure. Your thoughts about injecting another $1.5 trillion into the economy next year, gig economy happening in an accelerated fashion, jobs coming back, thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure that Uber was ever cash positive.
Mm-hmm.
It has not been to this point in time.
I mean, I don't think they've had a break-even point where
Right.
you can say that we're cash positive now. And so to Llewellyn's point about customers, I think that what's happening there is that they're continuing a business model that's based on revenue. And if you're an investor in Uber, that's fine, but I don't think they're broken even. I think they've lost money along the way. I think they're losing money now. So the question is this
they're buying their competitors.
Yeah, is this a strategic purchase where they can improve their customer satisfaction, or are they buying the competitors? Will they kill the competitors? I mean, what are they doing? So Uber is an interesting, everybody uses Uber. It brings the point where people would ask, do we really need to balance the federal budget to have an economy? And the question becomes, do we really need to have a cash positive flow to have an Uber. So I think
Right.
that's very, very interesting. Very quickly here.
Sometimes you've got to have a cash positive, although I remember for the longest time Amazon was not cash positive.
Right.
And it was able to grow, which means that you must have a lot of faith in your investors, must have a lot of faith in you. The thing about Uber, which is incredible, is that it has harnessed all of this money invested in private automobiles and put them to work. It has also provided low-end employment for the middle class who you can drive an Uber car without shame. You may not want to work at McDonald's as a busboy, although in income they're probably about the same. You just have a different social status. In the end, in order to make money, they're going to have to get their rates up remarkably close to what taxes were decided. And that's going to be a struggle for them. But they've certainly unleashed a whole new concept of taking high-tech, the computer backbone of Uber, and marrying it to an asset that is in most driveways. And that, I think, is an extraordinary achievement. Where it goes from now, I don't know. It's been tried, obviously, in other things, in Airbnb, things like that. But they're going to suffer as everything else is suffering in a down economy. I want to throw something else on the table. What's going to happen when the medical bills from the coronavirus come due? If you get this virus and you go to the hospital and you're in ICU for 3 weeks, you're going to get a bill of unbelievable proportions, maybe more.
1.2 million.
2 million?
1.2.
I don't know what it would be. But the bills will be huge. At some point, they will either break the insurers or the insurers won't pay them, and people can't pay them. They won't even have enough money left to go bankrupt. It costs a bit of money to go bankrupt. You don't just stand outside and say, I am bankrupt. You have to go to a lawyer and pay him money so that you can go bankrupt and shed your debts. We've got an economic time bomb ticking there. It's going to go off. And that people not only have huge medical bills, but they will also have run up their credit cards, and your happy neighbor bank with its usurious rate of 27% and higher will want to be paid, and people will find they owe the credit card more money than they can earn. And if you look at but it takes 28 years to pay off a credit card at the highest rate. This is a time bomb. People cannot do it. And you get to a point when people cannot do something, they don't do it. And this could trigger a financial crisis that will bring down other industries and will bring down the stock market when it becomes apparent that there is a financial crisis going on with or without relation to the formal employment statistics.
Well, Llewelyn, if you look at this much like we look at a hurricane, in a city, and if you look at what government does, and remember that America does not print money, it is all digital. So you can imagine a situation where this has created a disaster, just like we have disaster of a hurricane or disaster of an earthquake. I mean, if San Francisco fell into the ocean and there was a lot of disaster there, then we have a disaster bill that could be put in place. So it might be, and I don't know, I don't have a clue, that this virus will have the analog of the virus bill, of the disaster bill, such that it is treated, the medical bills are treated like a Katrina or any other large disaster in a state. I don't know, that's just a suggestion.
I think it is. I think, though, this may signal the end of the insurance establishment, where the insurance medical structure that we have, and it may have to be replaced with something a lot different, probably involving the government to a greater extent. Although the government is already in there with Medicaid and Medicare, the government will be in a larger way, and maybe we will have a system of private health insurance with a government option.
So I want to close. I want to close on a different point, but we have talked about it a lot, which is Tesla. Tesla is beating all their numbers. They're manufacturing in their cars with the new Model Y and you know all these cars. The Model 3 is now the fastest, the best-selling car in America 2 months in a row. In Q4 of last year, Tesla sold roughly 50,000 cars, and in Q1 they sold roughly 60,000 cars, and in Q2, which ended in June, they sold roughly 90,000 cars. What do you make of it? The stock jumped from June 29th to today, 400% growth, from $1,000 to $1,400. Some people are saying that Tesla will be a $10,000 stock in 3 years. What's going on?
I think it's a bifurcation of the automobile industry. I think that some people
is the most valuable auto manufacturer past Toyota?
Is it? No.
Yeah. Yeah, it's larger. The market value of Tesla is larger than Toyota.
Oh yes, right. I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's booming. The good thing is moving to Austin. The other good thing I think is that it's creating a trend. But here is the trend that's important for Tesla. Tesla wants you to buy the automobiles direct.
Right.
So coming into Texas, it wasn't so much their cap or their market value. It was the whole idea that the entire business model would change. So if I look at what they sell, it's a difference between how they sell. You remember that we had to pass a bill, I think, in Texas to allow them to come in because they don't have dealerships.
That's right.
So what happens then, if you don't need a dealership, then it puts everything else, it makes everybody else obsolete.
Yeah.
So all of the dealerships, all of the relationships between the manufacturer and the dealer, they're creating a direct buy directly, and they will bring it to you.
Yep.
So I think that companies come and go, their valuation come and go, but when you start talking about disrupting an entire business model, where the manufacturer goes to the dealer hires people to sell them, and you go back and do that. And Tesla said, we don't need dealerships, we'll bring it to you. So I think it's a wonderful trend. We will keep our eyes on it. And I don't know if General Motors would do it in the future. I don't know if Toyota would do it in the future. But I was a professor in Japan for 14 summers. And when people bought a car, they just went to a storefront and looked at the car and they delivered it to them. And that was a long time ago. So I think Tesla is a great, idea to look at, a model to look at. So they're a great company, but changing a business model will be greater.
I would like to say that it's very simple. A better product. People want the product. Customers want the product, you get a success. I think that I think what John just said is very important, that you've got a new business model coming, and the dealers, also you're going to need, a lot of the money of the dealers is made on service. An electric car needs a fraction of the service of an internal combustion engine. Gas stations are an endangered species. They may take 20 years, but they're endangered. And I think that your friendly neighborhood dealer selling your car at a price you can never find out, for a trade-in that you can never establish till you sign, and then you find out it wasn't what you thought it was. All that encourages the Tesla model, but by and large, they're super cars to drive, and the product is beating the market. And the product will, in the end, always beat the market. If 5G is the better product, it will beat out 4G, and that is the simple market analysis of why they're succeeding. A mousetrap, and boy, it's working.
I just think that it's fascinating that electric vehicles and 5G connectivity, the whole digitalization of industry, AI, machine learning, this is all at the same time accelerating in different vortexes. And at some point, all these platforms are going to unite and a new paradigm of faster services, faster, better customer experiences, better delivery, better everything is going to emerge at a level that none of us can think of, just like none of us thought about Twitter or Instagram or Facebook 10, 15 years ago. So it's what's going on is clearly a game changer. I think that COVID should get credit for accelerating a lot of these things. Wouldn't it be amazing if Tesla was a $10,000 stock and could buy Ford and GM and all these companies? I mean, wow, talk about a change of,
Well, these companies will try to catch up. They're not going to sit idly by and die. But we've seen other tremendous changes in the business model. That is more serious.
Sure.
For example, newspapers, which are rapidly becoming defunct because they don't have a business model which will deal with the internet. Mm-hmm. So you have a few large newspapers, the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and maybe one or two strong regionals. I haven't seen them, Boston Globe, perhaps, Los Angeles Times, perhaps. And you're going to see that happen in automobiles. And all of these dealers who have been local bigwigs, wealthy people with a dealership selling many different kinds from different locations, I think their days are numbered. And Tesla has shown the way. I can't see that the public really will really miss them. I think that it's a progression. The market is speaking. The market is speaking very loud and very clearly in favor of Tesla. Now, if General Motors comes up with a vehicle that is the equivalent of the Tesla 3, the market will speak. The market will speak in the end. But here is something very different from telephones. We take improvements in telephones. Oh, that's nice. Cars we like, cars we want. Cars have there's an initiative in people to go out and get a car that pleases them. And therefore the market at its purest is at work. And you see the result.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my telephone is a camera. I don't see it as a telephone. I see it as a camera.
I actually telephone people.
Mine is a game player. I play game. All right, gentlemen, we're out of time. John, you ready to take us away? Always a pleasure speaking with you guys.
Know the city of New Orleans, Illinois Central, Monday morning world. Halfway there, we'll be there in the morning. Through the Mississippi darkness, rolling down to the sea. When all the towns and passengers seem to fade into a dark green, and the steel rails still ain't heard.